This is the chapter 4, part 5 of this, and I'm going to start out with the variable declaration and scope, bottom of page 235 for this thing. If you recall, like anything else with it, when you look at when you have the scope of a particular variable, that means that what it can see in between the curly brackets. And when we talk about scope, we got to talk about what's called global and local variables with this thing. So there are certain scopes that you're going to see in this case with it. So if you look at the declarations for this in this case with it, so this program demonstrates how the variables are declared in various locations with this thing. So if you look at how what variables are declared, so first name is a string and stores it in string. So it's only between these curly brackets, the left and right curly brackets, that first name exists, right? So same goes as last name. So first name and last name exists between this curly brackets with this thing and how it outputs with this thing. So that's what the purpose of this program is, to demonstrate how variables are declared. Okay. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to go through with the. You need to know the comparison of the string before I don't want to forget about that. So there's also comparison of the string. Ignore both of these things, or you will see one question about what's the syntax for comparing the string, what's the syntax to ignore the case on the string. So make sure you understand the equal, ignore, and the compare to ignore case with that as well. Now, the problem I just went over with you is the variable one, and that's the variable of the scope of this thing. So in Java, a local variable does not have to be declared at the beginning of the method. In Java, the local variable does not have to be declared at the beginning of the method. The scope of the local variable begins at the point it declares and terminates at the point of the method. So when a program enters the section of the code where the variable has a scope, the variable has to come into the scope, which means the variable is visible to the program. So the variable scope, the one I just pulled up to you, let me pull up, hold on a second. So this is the one I was talking about regarding that slide that we just take a look at with it. So what this is saying is, if you look at this particular, the scope of this variable, you can actually declare this not until you see this. Okay, so this first name is actually this first name, right? And you store that into this first name. This last name is stored into this last name. So these first name and this is the last name. Of course, anything that's between here is a literal. That you concatenate with this variable with it as well. So so that's about scope and how you actually look at scope and the scope of the variable with this thing. When you come over here and you look at the conditional operators in this thing, this is the other piece about conditional operator, and this came from C++ as well. So if you have an expression 1, expression and with this is the syntax on expression 2, and it's a colon, and it's expression 3. Let's take a look at some of these syntax and what does all this mean. The conditional operator is what's called a ternary or 3-operand operator with this thing. You can use the conditional operator to write a simple if statement like an if-else with this thing. So the format is if this is the condition, expressions 2, and this is the else part with it. Okay, so here's what this kind of looks like. If you look at the expression, if this is the condition, x is greater than y, if it's true with this thing, you would actually enter the true part, which is this part right here. So if this is false, think of this as the else, and this becomes the false part with it. Okay, so if this is true, if this expression is true, you do this. If this is false or an else, you do this. Okay, so this is, you gotta know something. This came from C++ as well. So similar conditional operator. I'm not going to do the consultant charge with you, but it's pretty straightforward with it. In your exam, what I'd like for you to know is above conditional. You will see come across a conditional operator with this thing. So I'll ask you something along. Let's go back to the block code. When you use, what type of block code do you use to enclose a set of? So a block of code is enclosed. What type of set? Is it square bracket, the round curly brackets, the curly brackets? You need to know that. The other one is the another question I could ask you is the Boolean expression in an if statement must evaluate to either true or false, right? Those are the only two. Can it evaluate to I don't know, positive or negative, left or right? It can't. It has to be true or false, which is a Boolean data type with this thing. Make sure you know what a flag may have values to this thing. So if it's a flag, what happens with this thing? And I have a whole bunch of snippet codes for you to put in. So make sure you understand how to run a short snippet code examples of if you plug in the numbers with this thing, what happens when you actually plug in with it. Okay. So I want to move on to the case switch statements in these things. So the switch statement allows you to use more than ordinary values to determine how a program is branched. So there are times I use a switch statement. If it's a menu, very clean, you can actually use a switch statement to have a certain switch, which is the test expression that allows you to actually test through each one of these things. So a really good example that I really like for you to take a look at. This is on page 238, section 4.10, page 238, 4.10. They give you the month, display the months with it, and they have block case switch statements in this thing. So there's, I think it's pretty self-explanatory with it. You gotta be careful with case switch statement. The switch statement lets the value of the variable or the expression determine where the program will branch. Okay, so don't get too excessive with the break. One of the key things about break statement in a case switch statement, you gotta have these breaks in there. So after the syntax that you have, look at on top of page 239. You have what's called a case value 1, and it has statement, but you gotta have a break. So remember, if you don't have a break, it's gonna go down to the next value, the next case statement with it. It's gonna drop down until it hits a break statement. Or the last statement will always be the default statement that you will have. So be careful in how you look at the case switch statement. Let me pull the example of no breaks on this. Hold on. So 3 programs I want to go over with you. The first one is the no break one. And the no break one, if you look at the one that's no break, this does not have any break in its case switch statement. So if it happens to select B or A, it's going to drop down until, in this case, determine it's going to actually come down. Guess what? It's going to come down to the default with this thing. So you need to have a break and a semicolon to end any one of these statements in here. So if you want it to end in B, then you actually have to come in and you have to type in the break somewhere in here with it. So it needs a break statement like that to end it with B. Okay, but I don't want to change this code, so that's the one. The other one I would like for you to see is the pet food. So if you look at the pet food in this case, so whether it's uppercase or lowercase, it's going to output this literal and it has a break. If it's upper anything, a B or so. What's a good example of this thing? So let's say you have a telephone pad. All right, a really good example to use in a menu such as a telephone pad that has numbers in there with it. Give me a second. I want to pause this. So this is a telephone pad. See, if they dial, on commercial, you'll see this commercial call this string, the hammer or whatever, these lawyers that they have. So they put together these words, these digits to make word with it. lawyer, whatever it is, 1-800-lawyer or whatever it is that they call these words that you can do ABC switch if you have case ABC, uppercase, lowercase, and you return a 2. DEF returns a 3. You see where I'm going with this thing? There are a couple of reserved numbers that you cannot do as 1 and 0. Why? Because they start out with the phone number with it. So if you look at 9, it has 4. You can do uppercase, lowercase, or W, uppercase, lowercase, or X, etc., with that. Okay. So that's what all that's about with it. So let me go back to this one. This is the one that is the pet food one with it. So so all that. So let me talk to you about the switch statement. The switch demo. So in the switch demo, in this case, is that when you look at the choice, how each one of these things have a break, 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 and of course this can be the proper switch statement if you want to look at it. Okay. Let me end this part of video.